So we will now chant the 17th verse of chapter 12. That's where we left off before we had a problem. I gave a little introduction, basically just saying that we're going to finish the 12th chapter today. And if there's time, we'll have a summary of the 12th chapter at the end. Otherwise, before we start chapter 13 next week, we can have a little bit of a summary of chapter 12. So please look at the screen. There will be a slide coming up with the 17th verse. And I will chant slowly. You can repeat after me. Yo na rishyati na dveshti na shochati na kankshati shubha shubha parityagi bhaktiman yasame priyaha. I will take a little bit of liberty in rendering this into English. You can leave the slide there and see, but I'm going to suggest a couple of changes. This book that we're using is the one from Amrita Puri Ashram, and it reads, "One who neither rejoices nor hates," and I'm going to suggest maybe dislikes is a little bit better for us, "nor grieves, nor desires, and who renounces both good and bad." I'm going to replace evil with bad. "Who renounces both good and bad actions, comma, and is full of devotion. That person is dear to me." There's, in India, typically they use the older English, like where everything is he, and that man and things like that. So we're going to change those as we go here in the class. We'll just substitute other more modern expressions. So hrishyati is the word that means elated, or who does not rejoice in what it came up in the last class also in verse 15. And we explained why elation and rejoicing in this case is not an ideal thing. It's because it's temporary and it's always a reaction to something that comes into our life, which means that when that thing goes away, we'll be sad again. So we don't want a emotional roller coaster version of rejoicing and elation. We want a constant feeling of bliss and peace. So harsha, or here the verb form hrishyati, is the temporary version of that, elation. And Shankaracharya says here that this person is not elated upon obtaining something good. And when we had that poor sound connection at the beginning, you probably missed out what I said, which is that these remaining verses of the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita are talking about the supreme devotee, Parabhakta, the one who is one with God, in fact. So we would probably say it's Amma. For us, Parabhakta is Amma, someone who worships God from the standpoint of oneness, being one with God. So this is a description of such a devotee. And in a way, you cannot even call them a devotee because there's no difference between the devotee and the object of devotion. But still, for the sake of it, we call it a Parabhakta because that's what we are supposed to aspire towards. We want to become that. And so such a person is not elated upon obtaining something good, so-called good things. That's what Shankaracharya says about the first part of this verse. And then that word shoka comes up in the text, which some of you may know. It means sorrow, or the opposite of elation. And the point is that the supreme devotee doesn't feel any sadness when something bad happens. So doesn't get elated when something so-called a good thing happens and doesn't get sad when something so-called bad things happen. I thought I would share a little anecdote with you all, because this word shoka is very common in Amma's bhajans. And there's one humorous anecdote. After that long period of technical suffering, I think you deserve to have a little laugh. So I'm going to share a funny story with you. There was a long time ago, I think it was on the US tour, and it was Devi Bhava. It was towards the end, and there was a wedding about to take place. And usually, that's the end of Devi Bhava, and it's we have with these fast songs that are really energetic and get people going, before that final climax when Amma comes out and throws flower petals. So there's a song called Karutta Shokamam, which you might know. Karutta Shokamam Taratil Artidade Ennini Padutvamilla Bhagyatara Kangalillengilum. That's a beautiful song. Everybody knows that. And it means, "O mother, let me not fall into this deep, dark pit of sorrow. I am neither a scholar nor was I born under a lucky star." And the person, the song goes on to lament one's own fate. Don't leave me and just walk away like that. So what happened was, the very end of Devi Bhava, a wedding was about to begin. And right as the groom and bride kneeled down in front of Amma, Swamiji started the song. Karutta Shokamam Tadardil. So it was like these two people are getting married, and we're singing, "Oh mother, let me not fall into this deep dark pit of sorrow." And everybody who knew the meaning of the words was just busting up. You're not supposed to be laughing at that time, laughing at that point of Devi Bhava. But we couldn't help ourselves. Somehow that song came out. I think it was not intended, actually. So anyhow, you put these two statements together, and you get one who neither experiences elation nor sorrow. But from our standpoint, we think that's impossible. How can someone be free from those two extremes? Because we have that all the time in our lives. And the next part of the verse explains why, which he says they're free from likes and dislikes. The one who is free from likes and dislikes. He's saying that they're dear to me, but basically Krishna is using this description of the supreme devotee as a way to tell us how we should be. So he's saying you should be beyond likes and dislikes. It's, when you say, "I like this person because they're like that," then that he knows that, or Amma knows that we're going to try to be like that. Instead of saying, "You're bad, you don't have these qualities, you got to develop these qualities," that makes us, it kind of puts you in a place where it's like self-condemnation. They don't want that. They want us to have enthusiasm and self-confidence. So this is a beautiful way of doing it. The supreme devotee's intense devotion does not allow any other desire to enter their heart, only God. And according to the Saint Ramakrishna Devan, many of you may know him, he lived over 100 years ago, he said that the opposite is also true. God's presence cannot be felt in a heart that is given to attachment, aversion, and fear. So we have to be careful of both. We have to try to cultivate the right qualities and also avoid the wrong qualities. And then he talks about good and bad actions. He says that they don't have any good or bad actions, right? This means dharma and adharma on the relative level, the relative definition of good and bad. So Shankaracharya says here that good refers to our daily duties, like maybe spiritual duties also, but mundane duties primarily. You have to keep your house clean, you have to keep your body clean, you have to cook, you have to work and earn a living, whatever it is. All these things are our daily duties, and those are the good things, while bad refers to selfish motives and forbidden actions also. You can just imagine what those would be, hurting other people and so on. So in this verse, Krishna is talking about someone who has given up all notions of good and bad, all notions of dharma and adharma. Well, why would someone want to do that? Because if you are beyond all differences, let's say you are beyond all sense of separation from anybody, then these social mores and rules are not so necessary, because those rules come from God-realized beings, you know. But if you are a God-realized being, those things don't keep you a prisoner. So a very good example would be Amma's giving darshan to all kinds of people, disregarding the social mores of the time when she was a young woman. You know, she started probably, so it was in 75, so she was maybe 20, thereabouts, because she started doing it even before Krishna Bhava. She was hugging people all around the neighborhood. But the public version of it was around the time when Amma was 22. So here, just imagine, you know, she's abiding in the state of absolute truth. She's free of all opposites. So all notions of gender, social stature are meaningless to her. They were then, and they're still meaningless now. You know, we humans have our social rules to maintain harmony, but they don't apply to Amma. And knowing that, she was able to transcend the so-called bad and good behavior. In a rural fishing village, over 45 years ago, an unmarried young woman hugging single men, young men, foreigner men, licking the wounds of a leper, staying up late at night without a husband to protect her. No matter what traditional culture it is that would go against the Dharma at that time, these were certainly considered against the social values of the time. But this is only dharma on the relative level. One who seeks to attain the same state that Amma is in can only accept whatever the Guru says and does, whatever it may be. So that's why Krishna says to Arjuna in chapter 18, Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishami ma shuchaha. Meaning, discard all notions of good and bad and take refuge in me alone. Worry not, for I will absolve you all of your sins. So remember, all these social rules and rituals are for those who have desires, who need to purify their mind. And why does that inner purity matter? Because it is the main prerequisite for correctly understanding the Guru's teachings. Let's say Amma's talking for a long time, you know, and talking about the supreme truth. At one point, we're going to think, what time is lunch? You know, or, oh, I left something, you know, I left my clothes out, it looks like it's going to rain, I better go get them. You know, we'll get distracted because we have personal interests. So the degree to which we are obsessed with ourselves or preoccupied with ourselves, that much we cannot be preoccupied with the Guru or the Guru's teaching. But if you're already realized inner purity is a foregone conclusion, and when that ultimate goal is attained, the means to that goal don't matter to that person anymore. They still matter to us, but they don't matter to the person who is already in that supreme state. And if someone like Amma continues to observe all of the social rules and whatnot, that is only to set an example for the rest of us. She doesn't need them herself. And in chapter 3, verse 21, Lord Krishna says, whatsoever a great person does, the very same is also done by others. The world follows the standard they set. That's why Amma does all these things. She sits and meditates with us. She does all these things that she doesn't need to do, puja, singing bhajans and everything. But she needs to show us how we should be living. So hopefully this will encourage us to break free from our likes and dislikes, not begrudgingly. Sometimes we do it begrudgingly. Oh, today is fasting day. Oh gosh, how am I going to survive? You know, but it should be with the conviction that this is the best thing for our spiritual growth. And that is why he says, such a devotee is dear to me. The next two verses need to be read together. So it's a couplet of verses that we will go through in one at one time, still sort of breaking it up into small pieces, but we'll continue through the end of verse 19. So you can look at the slides. Samashatrau chamitre cha tata manapamanayoho shitoshna sukadukheshu samasanga vivarjitaha tulya ninda stutirmauni santushto yena kenachit aniketa stiramathir bhaktiman me priyo naraha. Okay, we'll keep the slide there. As you can see, some changes that I have made. One who is the same to friend and foe, and also in honor and disgrace. One who remains balanced in heat and cold, in pleasure and pain. And then that next part should be in parenthesis because it's not in the text, but it means also and other such contrary experiences. And is free from attachment, to whom criticism and praise are equal, who is contemplative, parenthesis, silent, content with any means of living, and we have to add here homeless, and we will call that quote unquote home hyphen less, quote unquote home hyphen less, homeless, steady minded, full of devotion, that one is dear to me. Okay, so Krishna is making a very similar point here as well, that the knower of the self, that is the meaning of the supreme devotee, is one who knows the self, God-realized, self-realized being. Such a person is beyond all opposites. It doesn't mean that they live in a different world where there's no opposites at all, a different dimension or something. They live in the same world that we live in, but those opposites don't affect them at all. So just imagine if you could live without being affected by these opposites. Their mind recognizes and accepts the opposites as a natural and inescapable reality, but only on the relative plane. In that sense, they have transcended the pairs of opposites, all opposites, not just the ones being enumerated here. Now think about it. We are the opposite. We are greatly affected by the opposites, which means we are effectively bound. We are enslaved by these opposites. I'll give you an example, a story from the first time I went to Puri. It was Devi Bhava night, and it's just an amazing night. I can't explain it all adequately now. Someday I'll talk about it. But I got my mantra on that day. And I can still remember the song that Swamiji was singing. Karna, Kanna, tik tom tam tika tika tom tam tika tika tom tam tika titayam nittamadu. I forget the actual name of it now. Kanna Karna. Okay, I'll tell you next week. All right, just to build up the suspense. Anyhow, that song was ringing in my ears after Devi Baba, and I felt so intensely like I wanted to meditate on my new mantra. So the next morning, the next day when Amma gave darshan, I asked her if I could meditate in the cave for 3 days. There was a cave back then that we could get permission to meditate in. And I said, I want to just chant my mantra for 3 days. And then she said, okay. So I got so excited and I packed up my things and I went into the cave. That night, I think it was. And, there was another person in the other room who'd been there for a long time, was meditating, and I felt so just, enthralled, and I started meditating. And, of course, I didn't know much about meditation at all. I hadn't even met Amma. It wasn't even a year since I had met Amma. I didn't know anything what I was doing. But I just sat there and I closed my eyes and I did whatever I thought was meditation. Of course, that's not what happened, because I went there to get away from all these distractions, perceived distractions. But all the distractions, I realized, were inside of my head. And that was the product of all the rajas and tamas inside my mind. All the hyperactivity and stagnation or lethargy in my mind. So I had the opposites there. Anyhow, even though there was nothing in the room, there was absolutely nothing to distract me, the opposites were inside of my mind. And I ended up, after a day and a half, I was supposed to be there for 3 days. After a day and a half, I was daydreaming and just thinking all kinds of things. So I got up and left. I couldn't do it any longer. So better than that is to remain in the world where you can teach your mind how to withstand the opposites without shock. So this couplet of verses refers to 5 pairs of opposites and 4 qualities, which are the fruit of a fully matured and developed mind. Let's look at the first one. He says, one who is the same to friend and foe. That's kind of hard to imagine how we would do that. But as always, Saint Jnaneshwar or Jnanadev gives a beautiful elaboration here. He always has wonderful analogies to use, so I'll share that with you. He's comparing this person with one who, like a lamp, does not possess the narrow outlook of giving light to those of his own household and withholding it from strangers. Or one who, like a tree, gives equal shade to both the one who planted it and the person who proceeds to chop it down. And one who, like the sugar cane, does not give sweet taste only to the one who waters it, it also gives it to the one who puts it in a press and squeezes it. So whether somebody is nice to us or supports us or does the opposite, the perfect devotee or the supreme devotee is equal to all these people. It's really hard to imagine, but that's what Amma does. So we can see that in Amma. A true jnani, a true knower of the truth, doesn't consider anyone an enemy. You may have remembered before I was telling a story about one of the Swamis who was in charge of the housing project, and Amma told him to check the neighborhood and see who needs houses, because she started from a number of places, but one was right next to the ashram as well. So this Swami, he went with a local politician because he needed to know who these people are. And the politician was a devotee, and he started telling this Swami who are all the people who support the ashram, and then these people, they didn't support the ashram. These people tried to just throw thorns on Amma's path. So this Swami, not knowing better, he had 2 lists. He had one list of the good people, it's Santa's naughty and nice lists he had. And he was showing it to Amma, Santa Claus, right? And like an elf. And Amma said, I don't want to hear about the good or bad. if you have 2 lists, let's give the houses to the people that is on your naughty list first. Forget about the list anyhow. So she wants people to know that she has no enmity in her heart for them. So that is the role model for all of us. And we should just remember that we will always be liked by some people and disliked by others. It's part of the life. There may be times when everybody loves us and other times where everybody hates us. That's what happened to me in the computer room. I also told this story before. But there was something, maybe Amma wanted me to go through this experience, but no matter which computer I would touch in the computer room, if it was broken, it would start working again. At least that was the reputation that people gave me. So I got a little puffed up. It's like, yeah, I can just got the Midas touch here. And then one day the opposite happened. It was maybe a few months before I got the Brahmacharya Diksha, about 23 years ago or something. I would touch a machine and it would break down, and everyone said, "Get out of the computer room. We don't even want you here. You're just ruining everything." So I went and worked in the kitchen instead. That was okay, There was a lot of difficult work and there weren't enough people do it, so everybody was welcome. So this is how it is in life, and we should not react to it. That's the point. Then he says that they're equal in honor and disgrace. Boy, that's another challenge. Think about it. Arjuna is a prince, huh? How can a prince who's been revered by people, and he is the one who gives them bravery when they're on the battlefield, all these people, what if they were to disgrace him or dishonor him? It would have been the worst insult to someone in his position. So if it's it's like that for them, but even for us, we even feel pain when people disrespect us. What can we do about it, though? There's no solution. You can't force somebody to respect you. There are some people who just get attention by irritating you. They feel that negative attention is better than no attention at all. You're going to have people like that in the world, and so we have to live with it. And just remember how many times Amma was dishonored, how many times people insulted her. So we don't have one tiny fraction of her greatness, but we can't withstand a little bit of dishonor from other people, disrespect. We should remember Amma's example and try to summon the strength to transcend such petty things. They're just petty things. Then he talks about they're balanced in heat and cold. Yeah, people here in Chicago are balanced in heat and cold because when it's winter, they don't go outside at all. That's how we do it. It was like minus something, the other day, and so it's so cold. Even the weather forecast says don't go outside; you'll get frostbite. So not that kind of cold. This is India cold, right? Hot and cold in India are not like that. You're not going to die of frostbite there. They're not in the Himalayas. They're in Kurukshetra, which is northern India. It's not the Himalayas. So here Jnanadev gives a little additional explanation where he says, it's one who remains the same in all seasons, just like the sky does. Same sky every week, every season, right? We should be like that also. And this goes together with that concept of being even in pleasure and pain, because that includes all of the contrary experiences. You can't give a list of all the the opposites, right? It's impossible. So they just enumerate a few. Pleasure and pain is a big one for all of us, so we have to face that too. So Krishna earlier talked about different types of people, then he talked about how people treat us. Now he's talking about our surroundings and how our surroundings affect us. So we have different categories. Don't just take that one example in that category. It should be all the opposites in that category, because we're covering pretty much everything, right? Different types of people, how people treat us, our surroundings affect us. That's almost everything. The point is that a knower of the self is even-minded in all cases. There's no situation where he or she is not peaceful. But we would think, how can you be equal-minded in pleasure and pain? Isn't that just like a contradictory statement? No, it's not actually. Because, strictly speaking, from the spiritual standpoint, pleasure and pain are for the body. And the mind doesn't have to be affected by those. We just identify with the body too much. We allow those things to affect our mind because we don't have a distance between us and the body. There's no cushion in between, right? It's like, what do they say, when they're on live TV, they have like a couple seconds or like a 30-second gap so that, in case something wrong or somebody says a foul word, they can go beep in between, right? But with us, there's no gap in between. So whatever the body feels, we feel it right away. And so we can't, discern the difference. So this being the case, we still have to fulfill our social responsibilities even while we practice all this. We cannot just remove ourselves from society and say, I'm going to do this right now, and I'll come back after I've mastered it. It takes a long time. So if you're a parent or a manager, you may have to discipline somebody. You have to discipline yourself, number one, but you may have to discipline others also. The important thing is that we have to try really hard not to react, not to identify with those. And when we're saying something nice to somebody, because we have the duty to do so, praise them or be kind to them, even if we don't really, have, we don't respect them like we respect Amma, but we still have to express some pleasure with them. We like you, but we don't get attached to them. So whether it's a scolding or it's just taking care of somebody in a nice way, we don't get attached to them, to the anger or to the good treatment we give somebody. It has to be all taking place outside and not inside of us. So we're talking about the opposites and how the supreme devotee is beyond all of them. Before it was how people treat us. Now it's how they treat us through their actions. Now it's how they treat us through their words. And Krishna, by giving one example in the different categories, our surroundings and how those affect us, then once he gives one example and says they're beyond that, it means that they're basically beyond all opposites. And here it's about criticism and praise. And Amma is equally indifferent to both. It doesn't affect her, because if it did, she wouldn't be able to do all these things she's doing, because no matter what you do, somebody's going to criticize you. She knows that, and it doesn't affect her. With us, we would be like, I'm doing all these good things. I built 100,000 houses, and they're still complaining. I'm not going to give them anything anymore. That would be our reaction probably. So attaining the equanimity that comes naturally to Amma should be our spiritual goal. She says, by striving for that quality, we're also in the process of cultivating it. Once, I was feeling like I wasn't living up to Amma's teachings. I think we all feel like that at one point or another. And I really was feeling down, and I was sitting near Amma, and I was just started crying. And she noticed, and then she said, "What's wrong with you?" And then I just said, I couldn't really express it properly. So later on, I had the opportunity to go to her room. And as soon as I walked in the room, I started crying. And I was saying to her, Amma's, Amma's teachings, I'm not able to live them properly. I feel like I'm being insincere. And she said, that making the effort is part of the teachings. You don't start from 1 and suddenly jump to 10. It's a process, progression. And we, as long as we're sincere in our attempts to cultivate these qualities and being like that, we are practicing the teachings. So this is what Krishna's going to say at the end also. But here, we can at least try to emulate Amma's even-mindedness in praise and criticism. So it's with respect to our reaction to people's words. That's what it is. It's not really what they say to us, it's our reaction to that. Then he says, now it's not a opposite anymore, it's a quality, contemplative. So the reason why I added silent is because that contemplative type of person is silent within. And even physical silence starts with mental silence. So we cannot omit the importance or overlook the importance of the inner silence. And one commentator says here, the devotee prefers to be silent. If at all he talks, it would be about the Lord and nothing else. His training the tongue in this way is equivalent to the practice of silence. So this word mauni, which is used in the verse, usually would mean somebody who's under a vow of silence, but it doesn't mean that here. It's like one of few words, someone who speaks very carefully, not calculatively, but just as few words as possible. That person knows when to speak, what to speak, where to speak, how much to speak, and to whom to speak. All these kind of very sattvic qualities, pure-minded qualities. So Amma says that we should only talk when people speak to us or ask us a question. That's actually what she said to the really early disciples when she wanted to give strict instructions. You may have to do that more, to talk with more, but as a spiritual principle, we should try not to speak too much. The law of supply and demand also means that our words will carry more value in smaller quantities. If you give too much advice, unsolicited advice, the value goes down. It's like flooding the market. And silence practiced in the wrong way can also become an annoyance to other people. I remember a long time ago, there was a woman, German woman, living in Amrita Puri, and she was trying to maintain Maunam. And Swamiji told this story once to all of us. Big Swamiji's room used to be the library, and it was just a room, and he would kind of go somewhere else whenever the library was open. And but this woman wanted to go there, and she wanted to get a book outside of the library hours. And so Swamiji was working or doing his sadhana or something in that room, and there's someone knocking on the door. And then he was like, this hour? That's odd. And then they knocked again. And then he came to the door and he said, who is it? No response. And then they knocked again. And this went back and forth a few times. Finally he said, can you please tell me your name? And because maybe the first time he said it in Malayalam, but then he said it in English. And the person on the other side of the door said, Maunam. Means I'm in silence. You're in silence. What are you doing pounding on my door? Isn't that what you would think, right? So there are the wrong ways to practice silence as well. So the best way is to try to keep the mind quiet. Then you'll speak only what is necessary. No more, no less. But in order to achieve that state, it may require a periodic full silence times, okay? That's understandable. Like the silent retreats you have, you may need to do one of those just to have a little bit of boost in your daily life so you don't speak too much. So another part of this couplet of verses is that such a supreme devotee is content with any means of living. Not choosy at all. Jnanadev, here's what he has to say. One who never feels joy at any gain, nor feels any grief at any loss. In the way the sea never gets dry, even if there's no rain. So we have to become the ocean. So when something comes in, you don't even feel it. Oh, was that just the Amazon River that just flowed into me? I didn't notice. Or there's a drought for 10 years. I didn't feel that at all. I mean, for the ocean, it doesn't mean anything, really. I'm not a climatologist. I'm just saying, from a spiritual standpoint, the idea is that we're not affected because we're full, always full, ever full. Shankaracharya's commentary is that he is content with whatever means is available to him to maintain physical existence. Then he quotes the Mahabharata, beautiful quote. Clad somehow and fed somehow, resting anywhere, such a one the gods reckon a veritable Brahmana. It's beautiful that you can become a Brahman or Brahmin, not by birth. Actually, it says in the Gita also, it's not by birth. The one who lives a life like that is a Brahmin. So this idea of everything being according to birth is wrong, and to the extent that it was integrated into social life was all a misconstruction of that concept. There's also a beautiful text called Vairagya Shatakam, which means the 100 verses on Vairagya or dispassion. And I'd like to share a little passage from that with you all, because I was reading these things before the sannyasa diksha, and it really inspired me a lot, so I thought, let everybody get inspired. I'll share this section, which applies to the verse we're talking about now. It's about how a totally detached person feels while living in the forest. The earth is his bed, the arms his ample pillow, the sky is his canopy. You can say her, right? It just so happens that the author is a man. The genial breeze is his fan, the autumnal moon is his lamp, and rejoicing in the company of renunciation as his wife, right? His wife is renunciation. Isn't that so beautiful? My dearest companion, renunciation. We're like renunciates of renunciation, the other way around. So in rejoicing in the company of renunciation as his wife, the sage lies down happily and peacefully like a monarch of undiminished glory. There lives the real ascetic who sustains himself on alms, unattached to the society of men, always free from obligation in his efforts and pursuing a path of detachment. His worn-out garment is made of rags cast away in the streets, and his asana, his seat, is a blanket received by chance. He is devoid of pride and egoism, and he is concerned only in enjoying the happiness arising from the control of the mind. Wouldn't that be wonderful if that was our only happiness in life? Now the mind is like our enemy. So communion with God is a true devotee's only concern. Because they focus entirely on that, they're content with everything else. It doesn't matter to them. It's just a means to an end. As long as it doesn't obstruct their connection with the divine, they're okay with it. So being happy with whatever we get applies especially to food, because that's where most of us are very picky. We shouldn't say, oh, it doesn't have enough salt, or it's too much masala, or it's cold, it's like that. You know, a lot of complaints come about food. So if it's health reasons, one that's different. But we have to also just say, whatever comes, even if you don't like it, it's a tapas. We can eat it still. And Amma said, about 37 years ago, long before I met her, one of the ashram residents made her dinner. And he said, Amma, you know, I made the vegetable curry tonight. Did you eat it? It's like fishing for compliments, you know. Oh, you're expecting to hear like, oh yeah, it was so tasty. I really liked it. Well, what she did, she gave a long talk about how we should not be attached to food. Amma says she cannot eat good, tasty food. And then the conclusion was, without giving up the taste of the tongue, you will not get the taste of self-realization. The taste of the heart will not be obtained without giving up the taste of the tongue. Okay, homeless, what does that mean? I put it in quotes because we didn't want to associate it with the modern day version of homelessness. Jnanadev says, it means one who never takes any resort in a house, just as the wind does not remain confined to any particular place. Just like one who makes the entire world his abode, in the way the winds ever pervade the entire sky. So this is more of a classical description of a sannyasi. They're constantly walking around. They don't stay in one place for more than 1 or 2 days. In our context, it means that one who doesn't have a fixed abode. We can still think that about ourselves. We can say, at least mentally, we should feel that our real abode is with Amma. That could be in this body in Amritapuri, or it could be as the Atma, because the Atma has no fixed location. You can say, I'm one with Amma. Amma's my abode. I'm going to go to Amritapuri, and then that's where I'm going to live. Or you can say, wherever I may be, I am one with Amma. Her abode is the Atma. That's what I am. And wherever you live now, try not to think of it as your house, my house, or I'm the owner. I'm the one who's renting it. You started living there at one point, and you're eventually going to have to leave there. If not by your own volition, against your volition when death comes. Steady-minded is another part of the verses here, and the commentators make it very clear that this means one who is not just steady-minded, but firm in Atmajnana, self-knowledge. That's what Shankaracharya says also. He says his understanding about the real Sat is firm. And Jnanadev says, one whose mind has become steady in the knowledge that the entire universe is his home. Nay, he has himself become the entire universe, both movable and immovable. So this shows that really, it's not talking about an aspiring devotee, right? It's somebody who has already merged in God, who has become the supreme truth. Bhaktiman me priyaha naraha. Such a person who is the greatest devotee is dearest to me. Dearest to me. This is still verse 19. And I think because of the troubles we were having, we will have one more class on chapter 12 to conclude it smoothly. So I'm going to leave you with some words of Jnanadev that are so beautiful. It's a beautiful description of just how much God loves such a rare devotee, the devotee who is full of love, had nothing but love for God. This is a description of such a parabhakta, and it's very touching. This is Jnanadev speaking from the standpoint of Krishna to Arjuna. Try to visualize this. O Arjuna, one who enters into the path of devotion and holding in his hand emancipation, who goes on dispensing it to all the worlds, one who brings in his grasp the absorption into the divine essence, and handles freely the wealth in the form of emancipation, and yet accepts for himself the position of the lowest level, like the flow of water. To such a devotee, I bow down and carry him on my head as a crown. I adorn my faculty of speech by the acquired vision in order to satisfy the longing for beholding such a devotee. I worship him with the lotus in my adorned hand. I have come equipped with an extra pair of arms in order to be able to embrace his body. Though bodiless, I have assumed the body form to be able to enjoy the happiness of his association. In short, it is not possible to describe adequately by any simile the extent of my love for such a devotee. You can just imagine Amma saying something like that. So humble. We'll continue next week. We have some questions also, I forgot. I will address those. I gave a lot of thought to them, so I don't want to forget those. So, the first question is, we may go a little over the time, I'm sorry. Could you please explain some specifics of our spiritual ignorance and how to eliminate it? Well, anything based on duality, which is pretty much everything in our life, starting from the body all the way up to the feeling that we're separate from God, this is all spiritual ignorance. It's not ignorance of a topic, current events or politics or something like that. It's not that kind of ignorance. Our spiritual ignorance creates the feeling of separation on 3 levels. What's called Jiva Jiva Bheda, Jiva Ishvara, Jiva Jagat Bheda, and Jiva Ishvara Bheda. So these 3 types of difference are the feeling of difference between me and other people. Then there's the feeling of difference between me and the world. And finally, there's a feeling of me being different from God. So to some degree, we can identify with other people, our loved ones, people whom we know well. Maybe your child, you know their heart very well. But that doesn't mean that the separation is gone completely. Truly, the only way to eliminate all of our ignorance is by realizing who we are. And everything that we're doing in this course and everything Amma is teaching us is a systematic approach to reducing that ignorance and ultimately uprooting it completely. A knower of the self, like Amma, doesn't have any of those differences. She feels one with us, one with the world, and one with God. She knows she's one with God. So removing that ignorance is the whole point of our spiritual practice. All the things we're doing contribute towards it. Mostly indirectly, but Gita class is one thing that much more directly addresses that ignorance. There was a question about the progression of these steps of devotion. We're going to cover those in next week's class. I was intending to cover it in the last verse, but we'll do it next week, no problem. We can pray for the blessings of the IT gods, all pervasive, wherever they are. We need their help. And so the 2 questions that come in between will be answered in next week's class. There's another question that has to do with the yugas, Kali Yuga all the way up to Satya Yuga. And the variety of questions that the person is asking basically boil down to the 10 avatars of Vishnu, of which Krishna is obviously one, and which yugas, which eras, which yuga just means like a very long time period. Which period did they come in? So I'm going to just give a quick overview so we can put that to rest, and you can hopefully make note of it if anybody's concerned. I'm going to get to the conclusion, which I'll tell you right away. Doesn't matter because, it's not going to change for hundreds of thousands of years, so we don't have to. Don't put it on your to-do list. It's not going to happen right away. So don't put it on the calendar either. So the person's asking what happens after Satya Yuga, and after Satya Yuga is Treta Yuga. So it goes Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Kali Yuga. There's 4. And then from Kali it goes to Satya Yuga again. Satya Yuga is the golden age or the age of truth. It's also called Krita Yuga, when human beings just intuitively felt their divinity. They were far better off spiritually than we are. But Amma says the benefit is that since we're at the nadir of human civilization and culture now, every little effort we make counts for a lot. it's like inflation. You just you just work a little while. When I was a kid, it was like what minimum wage was $2 or something. Now it's like $15. So wow, inflation. So that's what Kali Yuga is like. You do a little bit of meditation, you get a lot of good karma for it. And avatars come from time to time when a universal need arises. We come all the time because we have karma, our own karma. Whereas the avatar doesn't have any karma of his or her own. They come when the sum total of the human karma, or all the karma of all the beings on the planet, is so dire and so desperate that they have to come. So the sum total of all the karma, prarabdha karma, in the world is what summons the avatar to come. It's just gotten out of proportion, gotten out of control, and human effort is not enough. So thank God Amma came now. As we know, we have a lot of problems on this little planet, and she is helping set things straight. So yes, Lord Rama came in Treta Yuga and Lord Krishna came in Dwapara Yuga. But we'll go through all 10 of those just briefly with the durations of the yugas. So in Satya Yuga, which lasts supposedly, these are just approximations, we don't know really. Perhaps it's been said that 1.73 million years. I don't know, I can't even count that high. So I don't know if that's correct or not. And there's a big difference between the years of gods and years of human beings. This is kind of the going rate for Satya Yuga these days. And then during that Satya Yuga period, the first embodiment of Vishnu was Matsya, the fish. Then came Kurma, the tortoise. Varaha, the boar. And then Narasimha, the man-lion who, you know the story. Okay. Then Treta Yuga is 25% less, or 1.3 million years. And there we have the 5th, 6th, and 7th incarnations of Vishnu, or so it is said. Vamana, the dwarf. Parashurama, who was a warrior. And Rama, who you all know. Then the next time period was Dwapara Yuga, and we have, I'm going to go with characters that actually lived in Dwapara Yuga. Some people say Lord Buddha, but the time-wise it doesn't make sense. So we'd have to say probably Balarama and Krishna. Balarama is more of an Amsha avatar, but this is one way we can represent it. And finally, in Kali Yuga, towards the end of Kali Yuga, supposedly a avatar called Kalki will be coming. So Dwapara Yuga, I forgot to say, 864,000 years. Kali Yuga is a mere 432,000 years. And 3,500 of it's already over, so it'll be over like that. So Kalki, a lot of people claim to be Kalki, and there was a program in Madras at one time where there were multiple Kalkis on the stage, and it ended up in a brawl. I think that shows you that none of them was Kalki. And it's supposed to come at the end of Kali Yuga, so stick around. You'll probably meet Kalki in a few 100,000 years. If you're unlucky and you haven't dissolved an Amma by then. I think let's not wait for Kalki, let's dissolve an Amma and get it over with, right? Okay, now you're probably thinking, when is he going to get over with the course, with today's class, after all the technical difficulties? Today, I think we'll just chant Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu 9 times, and we will end there and resume fresh next week and have a full class, and we'll meditate at the end also. And I have one more question that came from someone by email. I know that I haven't responded to that. I'll do so next week because we're out of time. Once again, my deepest apologies for all the technical troubles we were having. Maybe we were testing your patience. Maybe Amma was teaching us all how to be equal-minded when we're talking about equal-mindedness. She's saying, what are they learning? Let me check it out and see. So, notwithstanding, I still hope next week goes smoothly. Thank you for your patience, and we'll now conclude Asatoma and Loka Samasta. Loka Samasta will make it 9 times. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. 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 Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Om Namah Shivaya. And hope to see you on Saturday and next week as well. Namah Shivaya.